First Liberty Live is just south of Los Angeles, California, near the coastline here in a lovely park. I've got Stephanie Taub, who's Senior Counsel with First Liberty. Hey, Stephanie.
Hey, thank you so much for coming here to my neck of the woods.
It's good to be in California. She is based here, and as we record this, it's the day after we got the news about the passing of Justice Ginsburg, hence the flag is at half-staff behind us. And the wildfires are continuing here in California. We had an earthquake last night. You live here in the midst of all that turmoil. What's it like being a new mom for the second time in the midst of all this chaos with coronavirus and fires and everything else?
It's definitely a difficult time. This is 2020, as everyone keeps saying. So we're glad that you're able to be here, and I'm sorry that it's under such circumstances.
Let's talk about the issues that are going on in California right now. You're involved in quite a few of these areas and definitely following the rest of them. Let's start with churches and the unfair and sometimes egregious restrictions that are being placed on churches and worship services around the state.
So as you know, California has had extensive lockdowns, and these are including churches and places of worship. So for most of the state, churches, synagogues, people are not able to meet in their congregations inside, and in some cases cannot meet outside under certain circumstances. And then even as the state is starting to open up, certain counties are starting to open up, there still are restrictions, such as a 100-person limit in certain areas, like in Orange County.
And to be clear, we understand that there need to be some restrictions, but the thing that First Liberty is asking for is for fairness in the way it's applied.
That's exactly right. So we're encouraging everyone to act responsibly and everyone to take safety precautions. We just want to make sure that we're vigilant against selective enforcement against religious communities, against religious minorities, people of every religious faith.
Now, it's possible that this could just be accidental, that in the rush to put restrictions out, that these are being unfairly applied because of a mistake. It's also possible that there's undercurrents here of anti-faith expressions going on where people are seeing a crisis as an opportunity to press down faith in the community. Is that how you're looking at it? Do you think it's more one or more the other?
I guess you have to take it on a case-by-case basis. The problem with what we see right now is we're seeing a lot of government reaching into areas that is completely unprecedented. We're being vigilant against selective enforcement. We're seeing the government change its regulations every few weeks, sometimes every few days even, when you're talking about Christian schools that have been encountering these situations over the summer. So it really varies, and you have to take it case by case.
We visited one of the schools that First Liberty is representing. Tell us about what happened there.
So we represent St. Abraham's Classical Christian Academy up in Santa Cruz, California. And this is a school that's been working tirelessly over the summer to make sure that they are prepared, to safely open, following all CDC recommended guidelines. They've torn down walls to make sure they can do social distancing. They've rented more space to make sure that the students and the staff and everyone in their community will be safe. And we are continuing to monitor that situation to make sure that they can open safely.
Yeah. And the issue there is, as I understand it, that if it was a daycare setting, it'd be okay, but if someone's teaching, then it's not. And is that the crux of it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. For a while there over the summer, the county was saying that you can have 12 students in a classroom, maybe 14 students in a classroom, but if you are not teaching them in person. So you can have them safely in your classroom, but they have to be taught through a screen, or they have to be, so your teacher would have to be in a different room, Skyping in to teach them, and so which is completely, it's hard to fathom what sort of rationale creates that sort of a situation. But it was throughout the state. Many counties had similar rules, and Santa Cruz County was implementing this. So in response, First Liberty sent a letter to the county, essentially saying that they need to follow state guidelines. They need, and if they decide to enforce, to create this sort of arbitrary restriction where you're allowed to meet for childcare purposes, you're allowed to meet for a distance learning center, but you can't teach the students who are safely allowed in your classroom, that is an arbitrary restriction that's not going to hold up to court scrutiny. It's a violation of your free speech, of parents' rights to educate their children, and a free exercise of religion.
And the inequity that we've seen as we've traveled around the state over the past month here is not just limited to the Christian faith. We're also seeing it with those of the Jewish faith, that they were specifically targeted for the High Holy Days.
That's exactly right. If you look at the Los Angeles County policy that they updated their COVID policy in September, early September, and it included a pretty disquieting line in there. They said that it's essentially a direct quote. They said gathering with friends or, quote, extended family for Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, the high holy days was not permitted. So essentially, if you violate Los Angeles County's health orders, that's a criminal violation, which could subject you to fines, criminal fines, or even potentially imprisonment. So the fact that this county said that you couldn't meet for Rosh Hashanah with this small gathering, it's just very disquieting to hear.
And my understanding is the county, after they were called on it fuzzied up the language a bit, took out the specific reference, and then went as far as to say they wouldn't enforce the regulation that they made, which leaves you to wonder why they have the regulation to begin with. But that doesn't bring a lot of comfort to those who are still under the threat of possible arrest if they should gather together for these events.
Right. To my knowledge, they haven't completely taken away the language that said you're not allowed to gather with friends or extended family for religious meals. They did make it religious meals. They took out the specific references to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur like they had originally in the policy.
Because of all those other religious meals going on this time of year.
In September.
I know. It's just strange. Now, this is a point in time, and these cases may have changed as we go along. So we want to reference that. We're discussing this on a particular day in September as we go. What else would you like to share as you look at the state of California? What would you like to see happen here that you think would bring more of a level playing field for people of faith all across the Golden State?
Well, I think it's important for our viewers to understand. I think people that aren't in California might not understand the extent of the lockdowns, the extent of the sometimes arbitrary restrictions and the selective enforcement. So we'd like to make sure that we're putting our trust in California officials. We want to trust them. We want to listen to them. And we encourage everyone to do so. But when you overreach, when you restrict in an arbitrary manner freedom of religion, especially in the policies that we've mentioned so far, then it really undermines that trust. So we're encouraging the county officials, the state officials to really take seriously what they're doing and make sure they are data-driven, evidence-driven, and not unnecessarily infringing on our most important constitutional rights.
Very good. Hey, we are glad you were here in California, keeping an eye on things. It's always a pleasure to see you and to work with you.
Well, thank you so much for coming to my neck of the woods.